Welcome, retro gaming fans, to our latest episode of Retro Reminiscing, where we take a look back at different franchises, series, and other collections of games and their history. While not totally a review, I will be giving some of my thoughts on the games as I go through them, but it's more to learn and appreciate them. But feel free to let us know what your thoughts are on the games mentioned in the comments below. If you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to go back and check out some of our other episodes, such as the ones that we've done on Double Dragon and Operation Wolf, and you can even go a bit further and check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/idreamofindiegames. But more on that later. Growing up in the 80s, I was a huge fan of shows like Voltron, Transformers, and Robotech, so I've always been a fan of mechs and giant robots. And if our YouTube analytics are to be believed, you may be in the same boat as well. Even as I got older, I didn't really stop liking giant robots, I just wasn't watching the TV shows anymore. But now I had video games with giant robots. As a Sega kid, I spent a ton of time playing a game called Virtual On for the Sega Saturn, which was a port of an arcade game. And yes, it was Virtual, not Virtua, even though it was Sega and they did love to call their games that. Unfortunately, being the silly Sega kid that I was, when Armored Core came out around the same time, I just brushed it off as another Sony knockoff. With Armored Core 6 about to come out, I felt that it was time for me to rectify the mistakes that I made in the past, and I went back and played some of the original games to see what they were like, and I'm glad that I did. For those of you that aren't aware, Armored Core is a series of third-person shooters where you pilot mechs, sometimes referred to as mecha, and there are 15 games in the series. Well, now 16, with 6 coming out. The reason for such low numbers, but yet such high amounts of games, is the fact that each number restarts a new timeline or continuity. For this particular video, I'm just going to look at the original timeline and series, which consists of the first 3 games, which coincidentally are also all on the PlayStation 1. It wasn't until the PlayStation 2 that we got Armored Core 2. Along with all of these console releases, there were several mobile games that were released in Japan between 2004 and 2008, but I won't be covering these at all in this or any future videos for many obvious reasons. The Armored Core series was created and developed by From Software, which was founded in November of 1986. They started as a developer for business software, but they would work on PC games in between projects. It's because of this that they decided that maybe they should branch out and release them officially. So that's right, goofing off at work led to greater success in the future. The first video game that they released was Kingsfield for the PlayStation in 1994. It was originally intended to be for PCs, but they felt that the PlayStation had better hardware, so they wanted to go with that instead. It was one of the earliest 3D RPGs, and it's because of these 3D graphics that they felt the PlayStation was the way to go, as most PCs at the time couldn't handle what they had envisioned. The success of Kingsfield made them shift to fully focusing on making video games going forward. After the original Kingsfield sold double what they initially expected it to, they decided that they needed to continue on and make some sequels. They made 2 more Kingsfield games, obviously called Kingsfield 2 and 3, before they went on to make Armored Core. The original Kingsfield was released only in Japan, so when Kingsfield 2 became available internationally, it was known simply just as Kingsfield, making everything extra confusing, but at least we got it in a cool long box. Kingsfield 3 would then be known as 2 internationally, and then the series would later inspire games made by From Software, including Shadow Tower and the Dark Souls series. So now we're in the year 1997, and on July 10th, Armored Core was released in Japan. October 22nd, 1997 would see the release in North America, and June 1st, 1998 would see the European release. The game was re-released in Japan as a PS1 classic in 2007, and later in 2015 in North America as a PS1 classic. Also of note is that it was on the Japanese PlayStation Classic in 2018, but no other region got Armored Core, unfortunately. The game was published directly by From Software in Japan, but North American and European releases were handled by Sony Computer Entertainment. This being the first entry in the series, it's set up for a lot of common themes that you would see throughout the franchise, even in different timelines. Earth experienced a cataclysm known as the Great Destruction, and humanity has been forced underground. Corporations begin fighting for dominance, leading to the increasing reliance on Armored Core pilots called Ravens. The robot designs were created by renowned mecha designer Shoji Kawamori, which I hope I said correctly, but more than likely did not, but it makes sense why I was immediately drawn to the way the characters looked in the game, because he's best known for creating the Macross anime as well as the Diaclone toy line. If you're not familiar with either of those Those were the basis for both Robotech and Transformers respectively. He's also known for creating the Vision of Escaflowne anime series, as well as pioneering several concepts such as transforming mecha and virtual idols. Kawamori was approached before the PlayStation's launch, and basically the only idea that they had for the game was the concept of a player-designed modular mecha. According to Wikipedia, Kawamori thought that too much player freedom would hinder the team's ability to form a unique visual identity for the game, so he proposed the concept of armored cores, a system in which the modularity revolved around changes around a core block containing the cockpit, engine, and joint connectors for the limbs and so on. From Software adopted this as the official concept for the mecha and the name of the game. The actual gameplay of Armored Core has you taking on different missions while piloting the armored cores, which are also referred to as ACs or cores. As I just mentioned, a big draw of the game was the customization aspect of it. You can change the legs to be faster, or maybe they're slower but can carry more weight. You can change which types of weapons that your character will have, what their head, arms, body, generator, all kinds of other things can look like. You can even change the color and patterns on it. As you complete the different missions in the game, you will earn money to buy more parts, or maybe even earn parts as a reward for being successful. Parts can also be sold off if you no longer need them, or if, we've all been there, you gotta make ends meet and you need some extra scratch. Part of the reason why you might need some extra money is that damage to your unit as well as ammo spent will cost you money and be a part of the total at the end of the mission. After everything is said and done, even when you're successful, it's going to show you how much you spent to do the mission and how much you earned, and so then what do you have in the end? And that could even lead you into the negative. Some missions might penalize you for collateral damage, like blowing up oil tanks or not defending a target. And also, if you fail a mission, it's still going to cost you all the money to do the repairs and replace the ammo. So this can easily get yourself into debt. Man, things just got way too real. The X button is used to boost or fly, the square button is your main weapon, circle is your secondary, triangle switches what your main weapon is. L1 and R1 is used for strafing, and L2 and R2 is for looking up and down, which is a bit awkward, but at least the controls can be customized despite the awkwardness. The boost aspect can be affected by your weight, and it uses up energy, as does using your sword and secondary weapon. You'll have to wait for it to recharge. If it stays within the green, it will recharge quicker, but if you get it all the way down to the red, you have to wait for it to fully recharge before anything else can be used again that needs it. The typical kinds of weapons that you find in mech fighting games are also found in Armored Core, so you're going to have rifles, lasers, sniper rifles, bazookas. If you can think of it, it's probably in there and probably has 4 different versions. There is some decent variety to the 50 different missions that can be completed in Armored Core, and they can be completed relatively quickly, at least to start. This leads to some nice bite-sized gaming that'll have you going just one more mission, which is what I really like in a game. The game can be difficult, but it is From Software after all, and so sometimes that one more mission, if you're not reloading saves, will just get you further and further into the hole. You can select which mission that you're gonna do next, but sometimes if you pick one, it'll change the branch that you go down, and there might be different missions available to you. This creates some sort of replay value because you'll get a different set of missions if you make different choices in further playthroughs. Early on, when you don't have a lot of money, it's sometimes hard to know which item to spend your money on, because it doesn't really tell you the stats or if you're going to even have the proper equipment to run it. It is part of the challenge though, and there is some appeal to that. If you do manage to find yourself in quite a bit of debt though, there is something that is kind of an easy mode, which is known as Human Plus. The storyline is that they do some genetic modifications to you to kind of make you superhuman, and it's a bit experimental, but the reality is that it's just a way to make the game a bit easier since you're obviously struggling. You do have to fail quite a bit and get somewhere around negative 50,000 credits to be able to have it available to you, so it could be easy to miss if you're the type of player that just reloads your save after every failure. Saving after every win though can be a bit cumbersome due to the slow saving of the original PlayStation. If you do decide to take it though, it does restart the game, but you're a bit stronger with things easier. You also might have an extra ability. For example, when I did it, the radar was something that was replaced with a rectangular one that wouldn't get replaced by my back parts if I decided to change it to something else. Some other bonuses that can possibly happen are you getting double the energy, the need to kneel to fire a back weapon being eliminated, or getting a laser blade wave, which is when you press the boost button at the right time when swinging the laser blade, a powerful energy wave will be fired off. While completing all the missions is still something fun to do, and there's also a lot of replayability with the branching storylines and customization, one of the real stars of playing Armored Core is the two-player multiplayer. You have the choice of either playing it through split screen or also through use of the PlayStation Link cable, which actually, when I was doing research for this, more games used it than I realized. I myself used it only one time as a kid to play the first-person mode in Bushido Blade, but it was just too cumbersome because you needed 2 TVs, 2 PS1s, and 2 copies of the game. Because of this cumbersome nature as well as the cost associated with it, it wasn't something that was widely adopted, and they dropped support for the cable when they redesigned and did the slimmer PS1, as well as obviously future PlayStation consoles like the PS2. This means that the only way to take advantage of this feature, even if you have a backwards compatible system, is to actually have an original model PS1, well, 2 of them, as well as the cable and 2 copies of whatever game it is that you want to play. Let's be honest, when it comes to the graphics, they're not going to be anything all that special, although they weren't as bad as I had expected. We're talking early 3D on the original PlayStation, so there's that look to it that you see with a lot of games that has that low poly ugliness. But the levels were much bigger than I expected and could be quite open at times. It's not your usual series of small boxes that you would get with a lot of levels in early PlayStation games. Music too is very much of the era with a lot of that techno-y sounding type stuff, which some seem to love and some seem to hate. Really comes down to personal preference and how you feel about that particular era of music. There is some voice acting that will show up throughout the game to give you your different missions and everything, but the character that you play as is a typical silent protagonist where he does not have any vocalization whatsoever. The original Armored Core was very well received when it was released and praised for its customization and especially for its multiplayer mode. It offered a lot more depth than something like Virtual On, so it helped it stand out against other games of the genre at the time. I did feel a little bit of vindication though, where as I was playing the game, I felt that the turning speed was a bit slow and annoying, but that was a common complaint even back then. Unfortunately, as time has gone by, it does make it even harder to go back to, but it isn't anything that's totally game-breaking to me, and I still found some enjoyment while playing. Fun little fact with Armored Core, the lead programmer did start off with the Kingsfield games, and he went on to do Armored Core Project Phantasma, which we are about to talk about, and then he left From Software to go to Square. He worked on some games such as Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, Romancing Saga, and The Last Remnant. So moving on to the second game in the series, we are going to talk about Armored Core Project Phantasma, which was released on December 4th, 1997 in Japan, making it the same year as the original Armored Core. North American release came a bit later on October 7th, 1998, and unfortunately it did not get a release at all in Europe. It was eventually later re-released as a PlayStation 1 classic, but only in Japan on September 27th, 2007. Just as with the original game, From Software did handle the publishing themselves in Japan, but North America had a different publisher, and instead of Sony, this time it came from ASCII Entertainment. They were best known for creating the Derby Stallion video game series, the MSX Computer, and the RPG Maker line of software. Project Phantasma is actually a prequel to Armored Core and takes place 2 years prior to the original game. It follows the player's investigation of the mysterious Amber Crown Complex, a testing ground for the shadowy Doomsday Organization, and their dangerous research codenamed Project Phantasma. The player encounters an escaped prisoner named Sumika who guides you as you are targeted by a vicious rival named Stinger. When it comes to playing Project Phantasma, it's going to look and play pretty much exactly like the original game. Even the menus are identical. In Japan, it was released as an add-on, but the North American version was a standalone expansion. In other words, it didn't require you to own the original game, but if you did, you could import your save file to continue your progress and have access to parts and weapons that wouldn't otherwise be available in Project Phantasma. New weapons and customization options were added to Project Phantasma, as well as the addition of an arena mode. The arena mode allows you to do one-on-one battles against the AI, similar to what you would have previously done in the multiplayer mode. You'll work your way up through the rankings, and this allows you to earn extra money that's separate from completing missions. While on the topic of missions, the original game did have 50 of them, but there are only 17 in Project Phantasma. With less missions available than the original game, they decided to forego the branching storyline mechanic. Instead, you'll just have the missions available to you, and while there are less, there is more variety within those missions. A couple other minor additions to Project Phantasma over the original is a replay mode and added DualShock support. Replay mode is exactly what it sounds like, and it lets you rewatch battles again from different angles, and the DualShock support sadly is just for the vibration and doesn't add analog stick support, so you're still going to have the same awkward controls for looking around. The split screen and PlayStation Link multiplayer are still available in Project Phantasma as well. It was originally intended as an expansion, and that is how it feels. It's hard to suggest to start with that game, and it's more likely that you'll want to play the original and then continue your adventures on with this expansion. From Software then took a bit of a break from the Armored Core series, and 1998 saw the release of Shadow Tower and Echo Knight, but then they went back to Armored Core and released the third game in the series, Armored Core Master of Arena, on February 4th, 1999 in Japan. It would take over a year for it to come out in North America, seeing its release on March 22nd, 2000, and once again it was not released at all in Europe. November 28th, 2007 saw a PS1 Classic release, and just like Project Phantasma, it was Japan only. For the third time in a row, From Software handled the publishing themselves in Japan, but there was a different publisher in North America, this time being AgeTech. AgeTech was actually spun off from the ASCII company as a way to focus more on the American market. AgeTech stood for ASCII Game Entertainment Technology, and it was spun off as an independent corporation in 1998, and later became a fully independent publisher 1 year later. Master of Arena is a direct sequel to Project Phantasma and actually takes place at the same time as the original Armored Core game. The plot this time? A massive battle occurs in Isaac City between two corporations and causes numerous civilian casualties. The Raven from this game is a survivor of this battle, having lost their entire family to the chaos. Swearing revenge, the player enters the Raven's Nest, the central organization of Armored Core pilots, to fight their way to the top and kill Hustler 1, who is the pilot of the famed 9-ball mech that was at the center of the battle. The story basically just has you rising through the ranks of the arena to try to get to him. Just like Project Phantasma, this feels more like just another expansion and not a whole lot has changed, but at least now the menus look different. The arena mode is back, but now it's actually required and a part of the story. It's not just an optional side mode. Just like Project Phantasma, you can also import your save or start new, but some items in the previous games will be exclusive, so you'll have to carry that save over if you want to still use them. There are 19 missions and 10 arenas that will cover you battling over 100 different opponents. There are 2 different versions of the arena mode which are spread across 2 separate discs. Disc 1 is the main disc where the arena mode is built into the story, but Disc 2 is EX Arena, which are bonus battles that are separate. As expected, the multiplayer does return, but if you're using the PlayStation Link, it no longer requires 2 copies of the game, as it already comes with 2 discs. For better or worse, Master of Arena was just more of the same. It had the same great gameplay if you loved playing the first 2, but it didn't really add too much more to make you feel like it was fresh. At this point, multiple years had come by and it was starting to kind of wear out its welcome. This was the final game though in the original trilogy, and therefore also the last game on the original PlayStation. From Software would work on a few more games before making the next new storyline with Armored Core 2 on the PS2 in 2000. Essentially every time there was a new number, it would be a new story and a new timeline. From Software would continue to make other mech-based games like Chrome Hounds, Frame Grid, and Metal Wolf Chaos, but the Armored Core series would continue on for multiple platforms and multiple generations. Armored Core Tower City Blade was a manga based on the game that was published in 2007. Also in 2007, 4 Tower Song was to consist of a book and an anime. The book came out, but the anime was canceled due to ViewWorks shutting down. Kenichiro Sakuda was the producer of the Armored Core series and would go on to produce a very similar game called Daemon X Machina, or is it Daemon Cross Machina? I never know when it comes to Japanese titles. But that was released for the Nintendo Switch and Microsoft Windows in 2019 and 2020 respectively. And that brings us to now with the release of Armored Core 6 Fires of the Rubicon, which came out on August 25th, 2023 after a decade-long absence from the series. So yes, as you can tell, there is a lot going on with this series, and while I did pretty much just cover the PlayStation 1 era of the series, that doesn't mean I won't cover the others later. I just wanted to give you some time to breathe a bit. Which games did you play in the series? What is your favorite one to play? Are you going to be playing 6 now that it's out? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're doing that, feel free to also check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/idreamofindiegames. By signing up there, you're going to help us out out here as well as over at our sister channel at I Dream of Indie Games. I mean, it is named after them after all. Signing up gives you perks like access to our Discord server, some exclusive live streams, early access to videos here at I Dream of Retro Games, and more. There are multiple tiers that give you different levels of access, so take a look now at patreon.com/idreamofindiegames and see what works for you. Thanks again for watching and supporting us here and helping preserve video game history, and until next time, enjoy gaming.